What does it mean to deny oneself, to pick up a cross daily and follow, to lose our lives in order to find our lives? Once upon a time, early Christians took this line very seriously. I don't know how many of you occasionally will watch the History Channel or know a little bit about the ancient history of the church. But for the first several hundred years of our church's existence, there were Christian martyrs who gave their lives so that they might continue to believe. They lost their lives for their belief in Jesus and are celebrated by the church for that incredible sacrifice. The Romans, as you probably know, believed in many gods. And so these Christians who only worshiped one God, they actually thought they were atheists. They found it very strange, Christian practices, the fact that men would often avoid subscription to the army and service in their military. The early Roman Empire, the Roman Empire that persecuted the church, found Christians to be a threat to the state. Ordinary Christians went to extraordinary lengths in order to worship, in order to join in community. Can you or I possibly fathom what it would be like to have to gather in secret for Mass this afternoon at 5:10? That we would have had to have sought an out-of-the-way place, maybe underground, like in the catacombs of Rome, to find freedom to celebrate our faith. We take this for granted, don't we? The freedom to worship, the freedom we have to believe in one God, to imitate Jesus. It's hard to appreciate the preciousness of what we have when we take it for granted, we see it as a right. And as you may know, when the Roman Empire came down on those early Christians, capital punishment was as brutal, if not more brutal, than it is today. The early Christian martyrs, just to give you a little bit of a sample, St. Agnes, she had a sword put through her throat when it was unsuccessful. They were unsuccessful in their attempts to burn her alive. St. Lucy, her eyes were put out. Sebastian was slain by arrows. Lawrence was roasted alive on a gridiron. Lawrence had a sense of humor, by the way. At one point, he said to his executioners, "You should flip me over. The other side's not getting done." Cecilia, beheaded after attempts to suffocate her had failed. Our own ancestors in faith were fed to wild animals, skinned alive, burned, poisoned, stoned, crushed, drowned, crucified. Our uncles and aunts in faith, in a sense. If you've ever had a really bad day or you're having a bad day, read the stories of some of these saints just to put things in perspective a bit. Why would I mention the martyrs, whose experience is so remote and different from our own? I think for some reason I was moved in my own prayer to meditate a bit on them in this passage about what it is to take up our cross, to do that on a daily basis, to put aside our lives, to deny ourselves so that we could follow Jesus. These ancestors in faith are an inspiration and a source of strength and of grace for us. They're part of our support network, if you think about it. When we struggle with our beliefs, with our church, with our daily lives. But certainly this heroic way of witnessing to faith is not the only way to take up our cross, to follow Jesus. This past several days, I've been really meditating on the lives of people I know, family and friends, people who in their ordinary circumstances, like you and I, have crosses to bear. This past weekend, I was with some friends from Australia. They reminded me of a couple, Nick and Melina, a young couple who have 2 children, and their second child, Dante, is 2 years old. Dante was born with cystic fibrosis. He requires daily treatments. He's been hospitalized more times than I can count in 2 years. And Nick and Melina live with a daily uncertainty about what's in store for their beloved Dante. I think about one of my community members who's in his 80s. And almost every day, he spends several hours with his older sister who has Alzheimer's. I think of countless parents I know who go to extraordinary ends in the raising of their children, making sacrifices and putting aside their own needs and wants in order to do for their children what they really desire for their futures. You and I know that there's all kinds of ways that the cross intrudes on our lives, and we don't necessarily have to go looking too far for it. The invitation, though, from Jesus is to find union with him, as our second reading says, to be one with him in our suffering, in our sacrifice, in our self-denials. To find these experiences not only burdens, but blessings as well. To find them opportunities for transformation, for growth, for our own purification of our egos. It is certainly not worthwhile praising self-denial on its own. But I do want to give praise to the love and to the faithfulness that supports and inspires self-denial. The same selflessness that led Jesus to his cross for us. The same selflessness that leads us to make commitments to others, even though they take us way out of our comfort zones. The same selflessness that ultimately leads us to the fullness of life. My friends, this afternoon, as we ponder what it is to bear the cross daily in our lives, we are invited to bring ourselves directly into relationship and union with Christ, to find ourselves strengthened and inspired and encouraged by his love, the love ultimately that flows through us in our own relationships. May we find hope and encouragement in his love.